I spent decades of my life growing up in Texas, mainly in a Southern Baptist tradition and all that entails. The literalism, the fear, the dogmas. I tried my best to adopt the models that Dad had installed in me at a very young age. Um, Tried my best to follow the script, especially after some pretty tragic events uh, in my early childhood that were pretty traumatic and left me reaching for something that looked like certainty. Honestly, there came a time when all of that broke down and I had to admit that it just wasn't working. And I spent a lot of years thereafter trying to deconstruct all of that, trying to get to the bottom of it. Why did I believe what I believed, and why wasn't it yielding all of the promises that it made? I thought that if I just read another book, tried to find a philosophy or a theology to replace the authority that I had been promised I needed to adhere to, that it would all be fine, that somehow I would crack the code and figure it all out through endless volumes of study. A lot of you know that as deconstruction. The theology, the deeply held beliefs inform our values, the way we think, the choices we make, the lives that we live. It's all knitted together. Ultimately, I did write the book. Took a lot of courage to kind of get really deep and vulnerable and get into the nitty-gritty of all of it and just put it on paper. And I thought that as a practice would at least be something, that maybe it would quiet the voices and change the behaviors and the patterns when things would show up and trigger and fire. That the catharsis of getting it all down would be the thing that finally set me free. And while it was cool and liberating to do all of that work, it wasn't enough. I wished I could say that I wrote the perfect book that would help me unwind it all and help my fellow travelers get to the bottom of their deconstruction journey, whatever that looks like, whatever was packed inside there for them. And while the awareness is certainly the beginning of the cycle, it's not where it ends. So I had to go deeper. Not long after I finished the book, but before I actually had the guts to publish it, I started the deeper work of trying to find a practice I could lay down. A good friend of mine does somatic work, but that really requires a practitioner. I wanted something that I could really do on my own. So I got to work on a tool that could help me, in those moments when I could feel something in the body getting ready to fire. Maybe I was going to say something or do something that I knew probably wasn't going to serve me well. I was feeling it in the body, perhaps in the subconscious knew something that I wasn't consciously aware of. But once I figured out, okay, something's coming up, and I would rather not do the same old things the same way and get the same results that I just don't want. Some of these things have cost us relationships, they cost us jobs, they cost us the life that we really want in this life. So, if we really take the idea of practice seriously, we can see all over the place where we know it's true. I don't care how talented an athlete is. Think of the Tiger Woods and the LeBron James and every great sports figure you can imagine over the course of your life that you've deeply admired and thought, man, I just wished I had his skill. Well, the skill's one thing, but I can promise you they practiced their ass off in honing those skills and wiring the brain and the reflexes in ways that would yield the performance that they were after. Why would we expect anything else? Even a savant of a musician doesn't just endlessly read sheets of music to become a world-class musician. They practice and practice and practice. It's a continually evolving thing. So that's what I did. I decided that, if I'm going to get better at this, I need to do something different when the trigger actually fires. And it was cool. I developed some things through the feedback, doing the mining work. Yes, it took more awareness to get to the root of the pattern, but then to actually lay down a practice that would work in practice when when something showed up, you do it once and maybe you get the result you wanted. Maybe it shows up again and maybe you forgot and it wasn't really as hardwired in as you think. Well, for me, that started to trigger a whole bunch of other stuff I had to unpack. The whole shame cycle associated with the theology that I was pretty much waterboarded with as a kid. When you're taught very early in life, when these neural pathways are really laid down, before we even have the capacity to critically think and challenge things that we've been told, if we're told a theology, for example, that tells us that we're broken, that we're fallen, that we're unworthy, through no fault of our own, we didn't do anything before we were born, but something happened that somehow damaged us, that takes its form in all sorts of behaviors. That's a lot to unpack, and the deeper these grooves were carved into our brains and our nervous systems, the more work it's going to take to unwind that stuff. But yes, we do need to be aware of them first before we can start to actively do the practices that are going to rewire some things. So then I did the practice. It worked a couple of times, and other times it didn't. I still reached for the thing that I had always done, and then the shame fired, and wow, this feels like failure, and why can't I get this right? And it feels like a relapse, like a person with alcohol abuse disorder reaching for a drink. Well, okay, you did, but you don't need to do it again. So maybe you can figure out you're not a complete failure because that experiment didn't work. You try again, and you try again. Every great inventor we've ever known has had a litany of things that would be deemed as failed experience before they got it right, and they learned and they honed and they changed course accordingly. Why would we expect any different from ourselves? It's not a straight line. I was even thinking about that on the hike coming up this morning. Trail running and hiking, for some of us, if we try to take the mountain and just charge straight at it, the more vertical it is, the more we're likely to just faceplant into the face of it. Maybe we need to think about some switchbacks and go in a different route to ease the path forward. And what might feel like a regression to find another way is not that at all. We're still climbing. We're still finding our way. So the practice might work that way too. It's actually a spiral. And it might feel like a regression, but it's not. Progress is still being made with every time we practice. So that's why I built Working Inland. It was initially a tool for myself. It was so effective. I won't say that it's a fix. It's not a panacea. We're not trying to just arrive at some perfect destination. There's always going to be work to do. And we come over one rise, and then there's a valley, and then there's another peak beyond it that we might want to tackle. It is a continuation, not an arrival. So don't let me overly claim efficacy here. It is a tool to find the practices that work, hone the practices over time as they show up, and the tool's built to do that. So I decided to release it as a product, a ministry of sorts. For me, it was deeply helpful in continuing the deconstruction journey out of a very literalist evangelical heritage that didn't really work for me in practice, and helped release me to a wonder in the universe and a view of the divine that was big enough for the experience and was not in rejection of things that we know from science and observation and everything else. That it was a more integrated thing that I could embrace. It helped me with maybe some attachment issues. Some people bring that sort of work to shadow work. But again, what we think of as the work oftentimes looks like just more awareness. It's not until we get into the actual work of integrating what we've learned in practice that the real work begins. So anyway, just a lot of brainstorming here on a kind of a rainy trail run day. If you're interested at all, the book I wrote and just released recently is called The Long Walk Out. It's a little bit of a memoir, but mostly about the deconstruction journey and where it led me on the walk that continues. But it's not a panacea, nor is Working Inland, but it is a place to practice. Have a great week, folks, and I hope your journey starts to yield more of the fruit that you're really after.